Welcome to the students from South Dakota. I assume you can hear me.
Yeah.
All right, good. South Dakota has been at the national finals several times. I congratulate this panel and your team for making it to the national finals. And I look forward to your presentation. I appreciate the hard work you've done for 2 semesters. And as we are to be your judges, you should know who we are. My name is Edward Volpe. I'm an attorney from Denver, Colorado. I've been with this program for a long time. And my fellow judges are?
I'm Caitlin Johnston. I'm an attorney in New York City, and I am also a We the People alum. So I did this when I was in high school growing up in Indiana. Congratulations on making it to the national finals, and best of luck.
Good afternoon. I'm Ed Murphy. I'm a Superior Court judge in Tacoma, Washington. And congratulations on being in the finals. I look forward to your presentation.
And if the students would introduce themselves, please.
I'm Shelby Sweats.
My name is Lizzie Gray.
I'm Gabe Knutson.
And I'm Toby Kinslow. And we're here with our instructor, Mr. Gainey.
Welcome to him as well. I think he's been to the finals a few times before. But let's begin with the question for you right now. As you are well aware, it is question 2, and I'll read it to you. A Bill of Rights is what the people are entitled to against every government on earth, general or particular, and what no just government should refuse or rest on entrance. Do you agree or disagree with Thomas Jefferson? What are the advantages and disadvantages of a national Bill of Rights as compared to state bills of rights? What are the differences between positive and negative rights, and which are more important to the preservation of liberty? You may begin.
We agree with the statement made by Thomas Jefferson that we need a Bill of Rights. To have government, you sacrifice some personal liberties for the common good. However, a hard line needs to be drawn. In the Anti-Federalist paper in Old Whig 4, the anonymous author claims that if you surrender your natural liberties to an excessive degree, you are no more than a slave to your governor. A Bill of Rights serves to clearly define how much liberty you surrender to the government. These types of documents have been made for centuries, examples being Britain's Magna Carta in 1215 and the Right of Englishmen in 1663.
However, we understand why the Federalists of old said we didn't need the Bill of Rights. To them, the document seemed almost unnecessary. Alexander Hamilton in the 84th Federalist paper says that a Bill of Rights would contain various exceptions to powers not granted, and on this very account would afford a colorable pretext to claim more than were granted. Hamilton goes on to argue that although the inclusion of a Bill of Rights does not specifically bestow power on the government, its inclusion most certainly provides an avenue to claim that power. This is addressed in our 9th Amendment, which states that the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. Despite this counter-argument, it is important to guard against the invasions of our personal liberties. Another insight that can be drawn from an Old Whig 4 is how people have consistently struggled to protect their rights. The author specifically lists the important documents that have been gradually endorsed by the British government at the demand of the people. Documents like the Magna Carta, the Petition of Rights, the Habeas Corpus Act, and the English Bill of Rights. Throughout history, it has been paramount to advocate for personal liberties, which supports the argument for the Bill of Rights being ratified in the Constitution.
When looking at whether a national constitution or state constitution is a better option, there are a few advantages and disadvantages of each. With a written and followed Bill of Rights, formal recognition is given to certain fundamental liberties. Further legal protection is given to marginalized groups, and it protects society from rogue politicians or aimless government actions. To summarize, it sets a standard. For disadvantages of the federal bill, the Bill of Rights implies that any right not written in the document isn't given. This is what the Federalists were most worried about. The Bill of Rights gives virtually unlimited power to judges to impose subjective interpretations. A last disadvantage is that when talking about federal bills of rights, they're sometimes too broad to effectively protect individuals. State bills of rights can tailor the laws for the needs of their people. However, this provides an opportunity for intense discrepancies when traveling from state to state. For example, Pennsylvania does not require a permit to purchase, nor does it require a license to own a firearm, including handguns. In the next state over, New Jersey, it's illegal to even possess a firearm anywhere without a permit to carry. This could be a major issue for legal Pennsylvania gun owners who may briefly cross the state border only to get arrested with their legal Pennsylvania gun in New Jersey.
Regarding different types of rights, a negative right is the freedom from something, while a positive right is the freedom to something. Your negative right imposes a negative duty on others, meaning a duty to do nothing and not interfere. An example of this is the First Amendment. It states that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. No law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, no law that prevents the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. Positive rights place a duty on others to offer something or act in a certain way. State constitutions contain many more positive rights than the federal constitution, such as the many states protecting the right to education. We've agreed that the most important rights to the preservation of liberty are negative rights. Though both types of rights protect the infringement of our liberties, negative rights work proactively to do so. Our government was founded upon both positive and negative rights to preserve our personal liberties. We are now ready to take your questions.
You have made reference to the First Amendment and the freedoms expressed therein. To what extent can limits be placed upon those individual rights? For example, the freedom of speech.
Freedom of speech there can be limits placed on time, place, and manner laws, which are already in place. Being at certain times and places and in certain manners, there are limits to free speech that are acceptable.
There is also the option for hate speech laws, though the United States does not have any. Canada does. So those are laws that prevent any violence or similar things to marginalized groups, such as race or religion or sexualities.
Other speech that is limited, other free speech that is limited is stuff like libel and slander. You cannot go out and false advertise or publish lies in order to damage someone else's reputation. You're also not able to incite violence, yell fire in a theater, or threaten the president of the United States.
What circumstances, if any, would cause somebody to lose the rights that they are guaranteed under the Bill of Rights or elsewhere in the Constitution?
Well, there is being a felon, you cannot obtain a gun. You also don't have the right to vote, which isn't in the Bill of Rights. It's in the further amendments, but yeah, being a felon, you can't have a gun. I know that one for sure.
And even when you are a felon, there are sometimes states that that have challenged that as well. For instance, Florida, you're able, once you pay off your debt to the public, you're now able to regain those rights too.
The voting one is interesting. Should felons have the right to vote in federal elections?
I believe they should have the right to vote after they have paid their debt to society, whether that be jail or their bail. I do believe that they should have the right to vote.
And I would disagree with that. I don't believe that they should have the right to vote. I feel that that is part of their long-lasting punishment for their actions.
And I actually agree with Gabe. I do believe that felons should have the right to vote. I think they live in the United States, so they have the right to decide what happens to it.
What is the difference, if any, between rights that are added through the amendment process and those that are established by a court decision?
With previous court precedent that is set through case law, decisions by the judicial branch sometimes are not always easily enforced, while amendments that are a part of the Constitution or the Bill of Rights and those that came after are written down and are legally enforced. For instance, you can point to the amendments passed, like the 14th Amendment, that would end discrimination after the institution of slavery, although we know that this did not stop.
And the amendments have less room for interpretation, while court decisions are kind of widely interpreted, can be seen differently from judge to judge, meaning they can be seen differently from state to state.
Which can have a more lasting impact.
I think amendments, by the nature of their passing, have a more lasting impact, considering how few and far between amendments have been throughout history. You need to have 3/4 of states to even ratify an amendment to the Constitution, so they're very scarce. So I think that when an amendment is passed, it truly is a very momentous occasion.
Well, you've talked about the power of amendments, and certainly that applies to both states and federal government. Which has been demonstrated to be easier to amend, the state constitutions or the federal constitution?
I believe that state constitutions are easier to amend because there is more of a majority that's usually within the same party within the states, so that there's less gridlock in the states than there is in the federal government.
And I have to agree with that. I think people who live within the same state have similar interests, so they tend to at least somewhat vote similarly. When it comes to orchestrating a large compromise over the vast nation of the United States, there are many different viewpoints that need to be considered, and this leads to disagreements, which may lead to no longer passing the amendment that was proposed.
So you've just said that states are perhaps more efficient in getting laws on the books because they serve their local populations. What right, negative or positive, would this panel propose be added to the federal Bill of Rights, and why?
I believe that as a positive right, we should maybe add the right to education. I do feel education is important in the United States, and I feel that we should emphasize that by adding it to our Constitution.
When it comes to negative rights, I believe that a amendment more focused on the online world, restricting power of the government to reach on your online footprint would be a good negative right to add to the Bill of Rights.
Is that a privacy right that you're advocating for?
Yes.
What privacy protections exist today, if any? in the bill?
Well, regarding online, it's really not much, especially with social media. You agree to all the terms and conditions and you pretty much give away all your privacy at that point. When it comes to in person, I don't believe there are any amendments protecting privacy.
There are no explicit rights. There's no explicit right to educate to privacy in the Constitution, but there is several things that falls under the umbrella of privacy and can be interpreted as a way to protect yourself.
And this would be like the penumbra zones that were popularized in a case law case. And yeah, I think it includes the Third Amendment along with perhaps the Fourth and the Sixth for the security or the privacy.
Many states allow their citizens to do things that would otherwise constitute a federal crime.
Could you repeat that question, please?
Can states allow their citizens to do things that are otherwise a federal crime?
No, they cannot. The federal government is the baseboard and the states are the ceiling. So the states can add laws that are not established in the federal Constitution, but they can't go below that line.
Time.
Thank you, students, for your presentation. We will go on with the follow-up questions from the judges. And I will tell you that I was impressed with the knowledge you brought to this discussion. A couple of things with regard to the comments that you made. I thought the reference to Hamilton was good. He didn't like the Bill of Rights because he said if you list rights, you will inevitably miss some very important rights. They addressed that in the 9th and 10th Amendments. You pointed out that we must still safeguard our freedoms, even in today's world. I think in particularly today's world. And I think the questions on computers and artificial intelligence and those kinds of things demonstrate how we have to adapt to new challenges that appear before our society. You were good on the limitations on free speech, time, place, and manner, and good on the law, hate speech and violence. You were good on the discussion, even though divided, about what should happen on the right of felons to regain their vote. Certainly, if you breach the social contract, you will lose your right to freedom and may go to prison, and you may lose the right to vote, either temporarily in some states and permanently in some other states. You were correct, in my opinion, with regard to the ease of changing the constitutions and bills of rights of the states, simply because you can deal with local issues. I do think you made a good point that the change of state laws can lead to interstate conflict, such as your issues with regard to gun ownership, gun possession, those kinds of things. The one thing that I would correct you on is that states can authorize certain acts that are federal crimes. And I look to those states who have legalized marijuana. Certainly there are states that will not prosecute marijuana. They've actually enacted laws saying it is illegal to use it and to sell it within our state, but it's still a prohibited substance under federal law. So there is division of authority with regard to certain aspects of the law. You were talking about the incorporation principles under the 14th Amendment. I should tell you that the Third Amendment has never been incorporated to the states, but most of the others have been incorporated. With regard to online protection, there are, pardon me, there are some federal statutes such as the Child Online Personal Protection Act. In other words, the ability of those trolls on the internet to attack websites of children and steal their information is limited by federal law. But we still need an awful lot of state and federal laws with regard to regulating what is a new issue for your generation. This whole thing with the internet is really going to be a problem for you to solve and your generation to solve. But with those comments, I'll turn it over to my fellow judges.
Yes, I agree. You guys did a great job. This is a super high pressure situation to begin with. And this question is very broad. So you can say whatever you want in the prepared remarks, but you kind of don't have any idea where the judges can go. There are literally 10 amendments that are fair game and then some in response to this. So it's not for the faint of heart. So I congratulate you on being able to, show up, tell us what you know. You aced the First Amendment question that we led off with. And in a couple of the other ones, you were building off of each other. There was good teamwork. I can't remember, one of you said amendments have more lasting impact in response to your colleagues' commentary on court decisions. Query whether it's, the ease of actually getting an amendment might have been something else that you touched on, because part of the reason there's so few of them is because it's pretty hard to do. And on I liked where you were going, Gabe, with the commentary about the online world, bringing the Constitution into our times and doing something explicit to acknowledge everything that's there. You could have cited the Fourth Amendment, which has to do with, search and seizure, and there are other doctrines there around what you were talking about, which is once you give up your data to a company, it's kind of fair game for the government and certain others to use it. But I do this in my day job all the time. So I was encouraged to hear that response. Great job.
I'll just echo what my fellow judges have said, that you did a really good job. It's a broad area, broad topic. You can go in lots of different directions. We can go in lots of different directions with the questions that we ask, but you were not stumped by any of them. You all had opinions. And the thing that I liked was kind of the back and forth between some of you in different, some of the different questions, that you were not all of like mind and you were able to take a position and defend it. And that's really important. So don't be afraid to do that in these types of questions where you really can express an opinion and give some thought to it. So very well done. Congratulations. And I wish you well as you move forward throughout this competition. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to your teacher for the hard work that your teacher has put in with you.
And that leads to the end of this hearing. So I'd like us to give the team from South Dakota a big round of applause for a job well done. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.